Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling. Let's see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today. We'll be relaxing as per usual. Weekend. Everyone relaxing, having a good time. I don't know what I'm getting with this. You'll be glad to know I actually did some drawing yesterday with some friends, but played a bit of ARAM in the evening. Actually, we're playing more ARAM today because there's an ARAM clash. I don't know what's going on. ARAM clash going on. But it was fun. We had like a late night conversation, you know, very, very nostalgic, I suppose, back in the day when it happens more often, which makes the times where it does happen even more precious, I think. But hey there, everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow at 3:29 p.m. on Saturday, December 14th, 2024. Interestingly, we ended up having a discussion about accents and about like doing and performing accents, which I think I spoke about before. The preface to this was basically in one of the campaign groups. I can't remember how it happened, but it ended up being that like one of the players was going to do an impression of all the other players' characters. Why? I genuinely have no recollection of how it even came to be. But you know, I was like, that sounds like a fun thing, you know. I'd absolutely love to hear it if you would do it. And he was like, all right, you got to give me time to prep or something. And except for that he was meant to do it like this most recent session, but then he forgot to prep or something. So I don't know. But then he was on call. It's late night, you know. All laws are out. That's not true. All rules are out. When it's like late night ARAM calls, we weren't even playing ARAM. We actually played a bit of Rivals of Ether. We did all the checkboxes. ARAM's Rivals of Ether and did a bit of drawing. And he gave his impression. I think perfectly fine, to be honest. Like you had to remember, none of us in this group are actors, actresses, or voice actors, or anything of that sort. None of us work in the theatre, as they like to say. We are all just, you know, regular old people who are just doing our best, I suppose, with whatever we can do. But it was a very interesting conversation about accents in general, which got me a little bit got me thinking about things in general, because obviously I'm doing a lot of random voices for the D&D campaign. You know, I don't have that many voices I can like pull off, you know, comfortably. And a lot of them I had to learn because I was just like, oh, you know, like I feel like this character would have this voice. I don't know how to do this accent. Let's try and just like figure it out. And part of it is for my own sort of like style, being like, oh yeah, you know, I thought it'd always be fun to, you know, learn how to do some of these accents here and there, or you know, almost not like a party trick per se, but you know, I guess it's all probably all tied into my interest of voice acting. So yeah, there is a lot of motivation behind it in the first place, and you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Like I'm trying to think. Like some of the characters I gave voices, well, like accents I like, but I don't know how to do, just so I can learn them. Like one of the main one I talk about is like, the Midwestern accent where you go, oh, for sure. Oh, that's not so nice. Something like that. Which I gave to the DMPC I have in one of the campaigns, and I utterly adore that accent. Which is why I did it. And now I can do it reasonably, well, I'd say. You know, not to the standard of it actually sounding natural, I think, but definitely to the standard of recognizability, which is kind of what you're going for. But yeah, no, if anything, I guess I need to reflect and factor out. I'm probably a lot better at accents now than way back in the day whenever I initially talked about doing accents. I think, just to remember, there's a lot of accents which I can't keep. Like, I feel like Australian accent is one I can never do. And the one I always, like, the words I always think to try and get into it is like, that's not it. Like, but I think also that sounds a bit more Kiwi than it sounds Australian, right? You always go nar. Or, that's not a knife. Now this is a knife. I think I keep going into like a New Zealand accent, except for I don't really know what the distinction is as much between them. I have to plead my own ignorance there. But I gave an Australian accent. This is behind the scenes. I gave Australian accents to two characters, or one of them they met early on, and it just kept slipping into an Irish accent apparently. So I was like, whatever, we'll just make this character Irish instead. Who cares? Because I was like, this character is not meant to last more than just this act or whatever. But then this other character is recurring, and I'd be like, you know, I feel like she would have an Australian accent. She's from the Polynesian-inspired region in my world. but then it's just like I can't freaking do this accent. Oi, 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 oi. And there's another one actually. It was in the same campaign. There's a character who is meant to be a throwaway character essentially in both campaigns, just meant to be more like the secretary, sort of like front person who they interact with like a bit, but interact with more as a means to interacting with a more bigger scale things. One of the campaigns, it's not really relevant to them at all, so they basically barely interacted with them. The other one should be a bit more interactable because they're actually staying within that region. But then one of my player characters, for some reason, adores this character. Mainly because he just interacted with him randomly. I can't remember why necessarily. I mean, obviously I roleplayed with characters, you know, not being a horrible person or anything. Now this character has, I think, recurred almost in every single session since. And I'm just like, oh my god. Because I wanted to give his character a New York accent, which I did for the first session. And then I was like, that's fine because I can't keep a New York accent. I don't know how to do it. Haven't even learned how to do it properly. I just think, hey, I'm walking it. and then, you know, from that, you try and do the rest of it. But they just keep coming back to him. So at some point, I need to actually, you know, actually legit learn how to try and do the accent. Because I wanted it to definitely be a bit more of a subtle one, not one like one I give like one of my players summons, where they go like, "Hey boss, you got it," or something. But they've only got one line, where it's just like, "You got it, boss," which is I don't know, some sort. I don't know. I don't know if they've done nominations of the New York accent, to be honest. But I didn't want to give him that like exaggerated an accent. It was meant to be like more subtle, if anything. But then it just blends into another character's accent who has basically just a raspy Cockney. It's meant to be like a raspy, slightly New York accent. But now it's also just become raspy Cockney as well because I can't do the New York accent. But it's a fun time, honestly, learning how to do the accents. I'm just glad about that sort of Midwestern accent. You know, I did it on stream once, and someone who I assume is American, you know, maybe they're lying, was like, "Oh, that's actually pretty good," and I was like, "Yeah." And a lot of my players say it's definitely one of the most contagious voices I do in the campaign. There's another one which is really recent in that same campaign. This is the other group now, who has my Cobalt Artificer character in it. Was really just the sweetest little thing. But that kind of lost the accent there. you always got to start off with, "Oh, for sure. Well, that's interesting. Well, I don't know about that sort of thing, but you know, I think we can try it." But anyway, there's another character who again is also a very sort of like throwaway character, but the players found the voice just utterly hilarious. Like, he just talks like this all the time. Because he's meant to be like a snobby noble, essentially. And I was just like, okay, let's just give him like some funny voice and we'll sort of be done with it. I don't know. They very latched onto this character's voice, which I find hilarious as well, because at least it's a very easy voice to do. It's more defined by the sort of tone rather than the accent, which makes it a lot easier, in my opinion. I find putting off tone a lot easier than accents. But I don't know. I feel like I've got to make this character much more important now than he actually was intended to be, just because I don't know, they find him so amusing. you got to do that as a DM. You know, you have like a million ideas, you throw them all at the wall, and then when you see one of them stick, you go like, "That's it, that's the one." Everyone, get in here. Everyone needs to sort of like, there's like this character needs to become more important, like immediately. Which I think he very much has potential to be honest. He's very much a through line to one of the plot points, I suppose. Spoilers, I suppose, but you know, I think that's like obvious enough already. But it's interesting how these sort of voices come to be, and you know what it's like actually doing them. There was also a discussion, like, I guess it's a very meta about the D&D thing, about one of the player's characters is very sort of like flat noted and like monotone, I guess is how I'd describe it. And he basically has a summon who's / kind of like child figure in his life, in the campaign, And there was basically huge story point where this character wanted to change their class because, to be fair, they'd never played any sort of game like this before, and they thought they wanted to be a ranger, because they wanted to be like an archer. But then they were like, no, I actually don't want to be a ranger, and after having more experience, I think I want to be a warlock. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, we can do that, that's fair, let's figure this out. And we spent like quite a while sort of like planning out how we were going to do this, how we were going to make it make sense, how we were going to make it feel natural. And I would say transitioning to a warlock is definitely one of the easiest classes to transition to, with no prior setup. And they basically had this really heartbreaking sort of scene where he died, or was going to die, and then his child figure saved him, and in turn also became his patron. It's hard to explain, I suppose. But another player in that campaign commented on the fact that it was like it's a very sort of interesting dichotomy listening to the scene, where I'm just like acting out this child character who was like crying like in tears and absolutely like heartbroken, and then hearing a much more sort of monotone sort of response, and a monotone flat response into it. Like she was just basically saying like this is not a way to insult the player, and I hope it doesn't come across that way, and I apologize if it does. But it's more so that, like, from my perspective as a DM, I understand that people have different levels of how much they want to roleplay and how different levels of how comfortable they are roleplaying. So, and I set the sort of bar of like what ends up happening. Like, if I basically did every character in my normal voice right now with like some very mild like intonation differences or something, most people are going to like not go above what I'm doing, probably, right? Because it feels weird, it feels awkward. Like I dictate the pace of like how a lot of things go, and if I'm not doing a voice, then they're going to be the only ones doing a voice, and seeing as I make up a majority of the speaking roles in the campaign, it's going to feel really awkward, probably. So I mean, and I did that like in mind, like that was a motivation behind, where I was just like, okay, well, I need to at least fully commit to every single character I do, because then that sort of gives a space where like, okay, if I'm setting the bar at like, I'm not gonna say 100 because it's not going that far, but if I'm setting a bar at like the absolute max whole threshold of what I'm doing to be like 80 or something, then that gives a comfortable range where everyone can go, like, if they want to stay at 0, they can stay at 0, and go all the way up to like 30, 60, and if they want to, probably sort of tease along the boundary of like go further into like the 90s or 100s, because that's fair. Like, that's like giving them the space to do so. But if I was at like 20, it'd feel really awkward. I feel like as a player coming in being like, oh, the DM's going at 20. Most of the interactions are at like a 20. I'm gonna, how could I step in here going at like an 80? If especially if they feel awkward about it and they're not sure like how comfortable they are doing it, they get no room to experiment with it. So I mean, at least that's my justification for trying to sort of sell the emotion. And I will say it was so incredibly awkward doing a lot of these moments. It's less awkward in one group because we have webcams on for one group, so at least I can gauge their reactions. I can see them actually like looking, paying attention, that sort of thing. I'm not saying the other group isn't paying attention, it's just we don't have webcams on in that group, and I just sometimes, like, obviously they don't want to speak and interrupt the scene which is going on, but I'm also just like, at the same time, I have no idea like what the reaction is. It's sort of like I'm performing on stage, except from in one campaign I'm actually performing to an audience, and in the other campaign I'm performing to like a brick wall, and a brick wall which I know people are just sort of sitting behind and watching, and I don't know, somehow that feels, somehow for me, I'm not a performer mind you, but that feels way more awkward performing to an audience is there but cannot see than actually seeing the audience. And I feel like a lot of people would prefer, like, for stage fright reasons presumably, performing to an audience they can't see and basically did not even know was there, or maybe not so constantly reminded about it. But I feel like I would much rather perform to an audience, because I don't know. I think part of the reason is because when you're in DM, you're in your own sort of little contained box of what you're doing, right? And it's hard to sort of feel like, oh, am I like cannibalizing the scene by just like doing the entire roleplay? But I'm like, also that's the expectation. Are they like actually engaged and like being like, whoa, this is like a really intense moment? So I guess it was kind of reassuring to find out, being like, oh yeah, they do hear the sort of emotion in my delivery, that sort of thing, and we're engaged with it that way. And I don't want there to be a pressure on the players to be like, you have to engage with that same level of emotion or anything like that. Like, if you want to, absolutely go for it.
But it was an interesting sort of thought. Like I never thought what it would feel like from the player's perspective of who's not in that cutscene. What it feels like to be like, oh, you know, the DM's like really trying to sort of ham it up if anything, and the player character is just like, you know, let's engage with it in the way I'm comfortable. What does it seem like from the outside? Anyway. I think that's a fun thing because the other players as well did like impersonations of the other players in their campaign, which I think is fun. A lot of it can be defined about more like what they say, I suppose, rather than the way they say it necessarily. There's some iconic catchphrases here and there which are tossed around, which I guess is kind of cool because it's almost like we got a bit of, not media is a wrong word, but a bit of like, let's say culture. Culture is definitely the wrong word. But some sort of like substance, I suppose, to the things in the campaign now. Enough to have inside jokes, enough to have X, Y, Z, you know? I think that's a super fun thing to have, you know? Makes me happy to see what can be done with that, you know? Yeah, I don't know what else I was going to say about that, to be honest. I don't know if there was anything. But the long and short of it is essentially, it was pretty fun to be able to listen to my friends I suppose, if anything, this is what I'm trying to say, is that the investment level now of a campaign is so high that they're willing to do these, like, things that you would do for, like, a media property, like, you know, impersonation of a character that you, in a TV show you'd watch. That's what it's like, kind of like now, and that's awesome. You know, I thoroughly appreciate how that's come to be, and it's not something I will take for granted. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to say. Anyway, I guess I was initially talking about accents, and now that's kind of stopped. Yeah, impersonations, I guess, if anything. I can't really do impersonations of people, but, you know. Okay, I shouldn't say I can't do, because that's, you know, let's not talk in absolutes. I would not say it's a strong point of mine, doing impersonations of people, mainly because I don't really know what most people sound like, when I think about it. Like, I think this is more ties in, well, I think of, like, pop culture impersonations, really. I don't really follow pop culture a lot, so I don't actually know, like... I feel like for a very long while, you know, there was apologies if it's too soon for the American folks out there, but like I legit had no idea what Donald Trump actually sounded like because I'd never heard like a voice clip of him. Because I mean, like, I don't go and look it up or anything. And you hear like odd snippets from the news here and there, but it's not like you really sit down and focus and pay attention of like that, I suppose. But there's a lot of like very famous people, I suppose. I don't really know what their voice sounds like, mainly because I've never sought it out. But yeah, I don't know. Accents, impersonations. It was fun to hear, basically. What I'm trying to say, it was really fun to hear my player characters do impersonations of other players in their campaign or other NPCs, because then to me it felt like a symbol of the level of investment that people have in this and that they're enjoying it. That's the TLDR, I suppose. So yeah. Anyway, on that note, I'm going to round this episode off here. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope we see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now.